It is now 7 o'clock on the dot. I do hope that we're live at this point. If not, then as you watch this video, my voice is going to cut in at some point. So I'll just begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jim Bennett. I am the chair of the Melrose Democratic City Committee. You are joining us for the second series of forums in this election season. We had one last month for the mayoral preliminary, and now we have one tonight, and it's actually in two parts this evening. The first part, starting right now, is going to be for our two marvelous school committee candidates, and then a little bit later in the night it'll be for our Democratic at-large candidates for City Council. So the Democratic City Committee is the official body of Democrats in Melrose. We're the official wing of the party. Our objective always is to elect and support Democratic candidates as well as Democratic causes. And that is the case tonight. So on our stage will only be those Democrats who are running. So in this first race, we have 3 open seats for school committee this year. There are 4 candidates who are running. 2 of those candidates are Democrats. They are the candidates who are now on the stage behind me. They are Matt Hartman and Seamus Kelly. You will be hearing from them tonight. Moderating this debate tonight will be someone who is absolutely appropriate to this. It will be our own Liz DeSelm, a member of our committee who has also been a member of the Melrose School Committee elected for the past 8 years. So I'm now going to hand it over without any further ado to Liz.
Thank you very much, Jim. Hello, everybody. And yes, my name is Elizabeth DeSelm. I will be moderating both tonight the school committee portion as well as the city council portion. Tonight, I would like to start with Seamus Kelly and ask you, please introduce yourself. Tell us what relevant professional experiences you have, and what would you bring to the school committee should you be elected.
School committee. I'm an active volunteer in the schools. I have served as a lead room parent at the Roosevelt School. I've been a library volunteer there. I've also in Melrose been on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and previously served on our Housing Production Plan Committee. Professionally, I'm a program manager at the Massachusetts Health Connector, where I focus on small business health insurance. Prior to working there, I was a legislative director at the state's Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development in Governor Patrick's administration, where I had primary responsibility over all legislation and budget matters dealing with affordable housing and economic development. Early in my career, I worked in the Massachusetts State Senate and I worked in the United States House of Representatives. I'm a proud father of 2 Melrose public school students. My daughter Mary attends the Roosevelt School. She's actually in the same class as Matt's son. And my daughter Claire is at the Franklin ECC. And my wife and I have lived in Melrose since 2016. I've been a registered Democrat since I turned 18 years old, and I proudly cast my first vote for Scott Harshbarger in 1998. And I'm a member of the Democratic Party because I support democratic values that bring people together and make life better for individuals and families. Here are my top 3 reasons for running for the Melrose School Committee. Number 1, stabilize the budget and increase funding for the schools. This includes participating in the school's 2023-2024 goal of having community meetings that explain the budget. We should commit to holding 1 meeting at each school so that we have as many people at the table as possible. 2, provide strong fiscal oversight and advocate for long-term planning. And 3, have high-quality curriculum for all students in the tools that support teachers, the tools that teachers need to do their jobs. So that's the reason why I'm running. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.
I would like to introduce Matt Hartman. Mr. Hartman, please introduce yourself and tell us about your relevant professional experiences and what you would bring to the school committee should you be elected.
Great, and thank you. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. I also appreciate that I got an audio hiccup while he got a lighting turned on him, so it's even now. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for your interest in our civic process here. So speaking a little bit about myself and my background and my interests, I have 2 kids in the school system right now, 2 kids at the Roosevelt School, a first and a third grader. So I have a long track ahead of me, which I plan in the Melrose schools. And I also professionally have been working for the past 10 years in the Massachusetts State Senate, first as a legal counsel and now as a chief of staff for 2 different state senators, where I've spent a lot of my career actually working on education policy, and in particular on education funding policy. My current boss was on the Foundation Budget Review Commission when they developed the recommendations that turned into the Student Opportunity Act, which is a real major change to how we do funding from the state level to the cities and towns in Massachusetts. In addition to this, I've volunteered for the last 7 years as a board of directors member for the Community Action Agency of Somerville, where we run a Head Start program for about 200 low-income kids, 3 to 5 years old. And since I've moved to Melrose, I've also been quite involved in what's been going on in Melrose. In particular, one of the first things I did when I moved here was join the Melrose Dems and participate in a lot of the activities here. And it led me to get connected to people who started talking about an override in 2018. And that was my first involvement, even before I had kids in the school, in working on the public schools in Melrose, where I got together with a group of people and formed a little committee where we worked towards building a consensus around what we needed for our schools. And that was a really successful process that I'm still very proud of. In addition, you know, I think speaking to what is important about our schools, I find education, and particularly public education, to be a real foundational principle, something that we need to focus on as a community, because I think it's beneficial to the entire community. I think it's something that should be accessible to the entire community of children, and that's the primary reason that drives me to pay so much attention to schools and to participate in it. I think some of the areas where I'm going to really focus are around budget and really digging into how we can better communicate our budget to the public and really help the public understand how our budget process works and how we can fund the needs and where we fall short on the needs of our schools. In addition, I think we need to have some serious conversations around our school buildings and where we're going with those, and continue to build up our educators and make our community one of the communities that attracts and retains high-quality teachers, and changes the narrative around how our educators you know, communicate about our community. So those are some of the key aspects, and I think I look towards everybody participating in this and joining me in achieving some goals around that.
Thank you very much. And for the first question tonight, that was just an introduction. So you ready? We will start now with Mr. Hartman. Massachusetts state law allows school committees to exercise authority in just 3 areas: evaluating, hiring, and firing the superintendent, setting district policy, and managing the budget. Given these constraints, how do you see yourself having the greatest impact on the work of the school committee?
Sure. In particular, I think I have a lot of experience with Massachusetts school budgeting, understanding the streams of money that come in and out of a city and town and fund our schools. And I think there's a real aspect there where I could elevate the conversation around our budget and really be able to explain to people and communicate to people about what that budget means, and in particular about what we need for our schools. I think we constantly need to focus on what we need for the future of our schools, focus on a pathway for our budget to be successful in the future for all of our children. And so that is one area. In addition, around managing a superintendent, as I mentioned, I've spent the last 7 years as a board of directors member. I have a lot of experience with managing a superintendent, managing an executive director at that organization. We actually had the same executive director from before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and after the pandemic. And we actually grew the organization and expanded the work that we're doing in the community in Somerville through our collaboration with our executive director. So I think I have a lot of experience there. In addition, on school policy, I know a lot from my experience in the State House. I know the things that people are lobbying for. I know the things that we can and can't do around school policy. And I know the areas where we, in particular, can improve on school policies. And implementing those things and working with colleagues on the school committee to do so as well as the superintendent. I think those are all areas where I bring some really good expertise and experience.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kelly.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think We're in the process of hiring a new superintendent, so unfortunately, I don't believe Matt and I will have a real role in that. But I think when we do get a new superintendent, we need somebody who's going to be willing to roll up their sleeves and really tackle some of the longstanding problems that voters care about here in Melrose. We consistently hear about things around special education, behavior in the middle school, things like that. I think we need to push the superintendent to really tackle. I also think we need to set a goal of the superintendent to bring in additional funding to the schools and have the superintendent be evaluated on that. So that would be really aggressively doubling down on going after state and federal grants, grants from nonprofits. And then I think another role of being on the school committee is going to be starting to plan for the next teacher contract and having community conversations about what does Melrose want its schools to be like, and how do we get there with the limited resources that we have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kelly, this question will start with you. The Melrose School Committee is currently in the process of searching for a new superintendent. Potentially, you could be voting to approve the next superintendent. What are the top qualities you want to see in the next superintendent of Melrose Public Schools?
Sure. I think the most important thing is a talented educator who has broad and deep experience running the schools, very broad and deep experience managing schools and people, a person who's committed to the success of all students, and as I just previously said, somebody who's willing to tackle longstanding problems that we continuously hear about in Melrose. When Matt and I have appeared before the CPAC board, we heard a number of concerns with the way the special education departments run. As I've been out door knocking, I've been hearing from families who have experienced challenges within the school district for a variety of things, and I think getting a superintendent who can really tackle those things, be willing to work, and bring a new approach is something that we need here in Melrose.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Hartman, please.
Sure. So as we're going through the superintendent search process, I am thinking about a lot of things around what we need to do to develop a strategy for moving forward. And I think that's one of the key aspects that I look for in a superintendent would be a real strategic thinker who can get above the daily and weekly emergencies that happen within the schools. Someone who has experience with those weekly emergencies as an administrator and also as an educator in the classroom. I think that's a really important aspect of it that they'll need to understand as they're working through those emergencies. But at the same time, they're going to have that continuous strategic thought going through the weeks where we have anything going on to make sure that we're following strategic plans to implement things that we need to achieve. One of the things that I hear so much about, and Seamus just spoke about it, about the CPAC meeting we went to, but I certainly hear it when I'm knocking on doors as well. There's a lot of families that are struggling with our special education needs here in Melrose, and we have to have a superintendent with experience in addressing needs like that to build better programs in our district, to keep improving them as we move through the daily crises that we see, and to make sure that we're following that path. So strategic thinking is probably the biggest thing that I'm thinking about when I'm hearing superintendent candidates speak. I'm really glad that the school committee is currently going through a strategic process to outline some goals and some measuring points, but we're going to need a superintendent who can implement that.
Very good, thank you. Question number 3. 5 of the other 6 members of the school committee, like you, will be directly elected to the school committee. The remaining member will be the new mayor. How do you view the relationship of the elected members of the school committee to the mayor, and how would you manage that relationship? We start with you, Mr. Hartman.
Great question. So I think that the mayor is really a key partner on the school committee. They hold many of the powers of the budget that the school committee itself doesn't necessarily have. The mayor manages the entire city budget, so effectively they have the ability to control many aspects of the school district as well. There has to be a real collaborative spirit between the directly elected school committee members and the mayor to make sure that the goals of the members that are elected for the sole purpose of managing the schools and the superintendent and making progress on our strategic plan and educating all our kids are effectuated by the mayor's process as well. That collaborative relationship is incredibly important. I think it involves a lot of discussion with the mayor about how their plans for the city as a whole fit together with the school committee. And at a core, I think that the responsibility of the directly elected committee members is to really express the needs of the schools, the needs of our students and families, very succinctly and directly to the mayor. And I think that's a great opportunity with the mayor on the school committee to have that direct conversation on a regular basis with the mayor. And I think that's incredibly important to make sure that our success is seen.
Very well, thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Sure, thank you. So I think the relationship between the mayor and the members of the school committee is critical. I think we're very lucky that we're going to have a great mayor in Jen Grigoritis, who cares passionately about the schools. But I think it's going to be time for members of the school committee to really push the mayor to look at the city's budget and not put all of its challenges on the school district. That needs to stop. I don't think we can ask the school district to solve the city's financial problems. So I think we're going to have a mayor who's going to be focused on that, so I think that will be a good thing. I think that one of the things that Jen is talking about is getting a dedicated grant writer for the city, and I think if she can do that and get funds for other departments and then start moving money over into the schools is something that I would advocate if I'm on the school committee. And then I also think we need to push the mayor and other people to utilize powers that we have or tools that we have, such as overrides, adopting the CPA, using debt exclusions, using borrowing authority, to free up funds that can then be dedicated into the schools. So those are the things that I would like to look for as a school committee member dealing with our new mayor, Jen Grigoritis.
Thank you very much. Question number 4, and we will start with you, Mr. Kelly. The only formal interaction between the school committee and the city council comes when the city council approves the school committee's budget. In the past, this annual event has been a pro forma exercise. But this past year, some members of the city council used the occasion to critique the performance of the school committee and the school administration. What should the relationship of the school committee to the city council be, and how would you handle that relationship?
Sure, so I think part of the reason why that came up was just catching everybody by surprise with the budget issues, and the city councilors rightly asked questions of the school committee. But I do think that in the past there was a liaison between the city council and the school committee. That might be something worth exploring so that they're informed about what's going on in the schools. But I do think it is ultimately the responsibility of the school committee to be setting the budget and policies of the schools and not have the council getting as deeply involved into the school policies as they have, albeit I will give them that this past year was quite unique.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Hartman, for you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think there are some important questions raised by that question, particularly around how we develop a community sense of knowledge about what's going on all of our boards and commissions, but in particular with the school committee. As I think, it was clear that there wasn't enough of an understanding of everything that was going on, and that was quite a surprising series of events to everybody in the community as well as the city council. So I think, in particular, one of the ideas that I've been thinking about is having a liaison or some sort of mechanism where a school committee member could be regularly appearing to some extent at city council meetings and giving the updates that come along. One of the things that I do in my job is bore people with information. You bore them over until they have too much information, and I think that's something that we could pursue as an idea with the school committee. There isn't a direct reporting relationship in any way, and nor necessarily should there be. The schools have a really independent mandate to make sure we're educating all of our kids. But I do think that the city council certainly deserves information, and if they are desirous of it, we can give them more, as maybe more than they can handle. So I do think that's important because we do need all of our city council members to support the budgets of the schools and to make sure that they're keeping the kids in our community, the families in our community in their mind as we're developing a citywide budget.
Thank you very much. Question number 5, and this will begin with you, Mr. Hartman. It has long been the practice of the mayoral administration to deliberately underfund Melrose Public Schools while fully funding other cities' departments, using the expected windfall of free cash to plug the school system's structural deficit. What are your thoughts on this practice? Would you, if you could, eliminate this, and if so, how?
So the straightforward answer is yes, I would eliminate it if I could. I don't think it's a financially healthy practice. I think it constantly pits the schools in a position of deficit, which is felt by the community not only in the classroom, which is the most important space where it is felt. Teachers, administrators cannot plan for the future when there is a constant deficit mindset. So I think it is absolutely an important factor there. It's also an important factor in the community. I think it's important for the community to understand that we are funding the programs we need for our kids to be successful in the schools. And if we are building budgets with deficits built into them, we are not telling the community that we are doing that. And even though we have a solve down the road, it doesn't mean we are telling the community we are on a good path. We need to do that through our budgeting. We need to find the means to do it ahead of schedule, not midway through the year, which is exactly what we're facing this year. And I know that that was the only option. But I think we need to have a real significant conversation in the community about how we make sure that gap is filled before we write more budgets.
Thank you. And Mr. Kelly?
Sure. So, as I mentioned previously, the city does operate with a structural deficit, and they've chosen to house it in the school district, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think we need to, the schools do not have enough efficiencies to make up for the city's structural budget deficit. So I think we need to dedicate much more funds to the school, not operate in a way that we set a budget and then maybe 6 months down the road we'll allocate the funds to pay for it. Because if those funds suddenly aren't available, it would be truly devastating to the school district. It would be devastating to our teachers, our students, our paraprofessionals, and it's just not the right way to operate.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And this brings us to our final question. Do you have any final thoughts you wish to share with us? One last campaign pitch. Mr. Kelly, we will start with you.
Sure. So I think throughout my time on Knocking on Doors, I've been hearing about space issues in the schools, and I see it at Roosevelt where my daughter goes, where they've got kids getting services in hallways, and so we know we have a major space issue. So I think it would be time to dust off the discussion about the BB school and what are we going to do with that. I don't have all the answers, and the analysis that was done for it is 4 years old at this point, so costs are way out of whack at this point. But I think we have to look at that for working on some of our space issues that we have. I also think we maybe want to give some consideration to what could we do within the schools to help the teachers have a better work day, if you will. And I think one of them might be increasing janitorial services that the schools have. Right now, they've got one during the day if somebody calls out sick. I don't know how they staff it, but many school districts would have 2 shifts so that you can get the building cleaned throughout the day, cleaned at night. Teachers are coming into their classrooms, and they're in good shape. And I think that's something that we might want to consider for our facilities. And then I think that we probably need to start having a conversation with the Mass School Building Authority around discussions about renovating the Winthrop School. That one seems to be the one that needs the most work. So those are some of the things that I'd like to think about for facilities.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Hartman, your closing thoughts.
So I'm considering this our closing statement. There's not an extra time for that. Yeah, I think that I want to do the little things and the big things. We have the big things. I think a lot of people know about the big things. We have a $3 million deficit that we're going to have to patch immediately in January. I will not be a quiet voice about that. I think that is critical to fill that deficit as soon as we have funds available for it. And we have other big things. We have a new superintendent that's going to be coming in. We have a new mayoral administration. These are big changes for our district and our community, and those are the big things. But I think we can also do the little things. We are currently building a website for the schools. It is being updated every day. I think that's tremendous. There's little things that we can keep adding to that. We have to pay attention to things like that. We have to build other communication strategies as well so that people who are entering special ed programs understand the pathway that they're starting on. Those are little things that we can develop and focus on as a school committee so that people are feeling that we're progressing in little ways and big ways and developing those conversations. So I really want to be able to bring a lot of my experience to the table. as I did when I worked for a whole year developing what we did in 2018 and 2019. And I think that I could be very successful at really enhancing our community conversations around what we're doing, hopefully bringing more voice to a lot of the issues that we have in front of us, and making sure that we're doing the little things and the big things at the same time.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, your school committee Democrat candidates. And stay tuned. In roughly 20 minutes, we will have the city council candidates coming before us.
So good evening, everybody, again, quite possibly, to the Melrose Democratic City Committee forums. Our forum right now is going to be for the Councillor at-Large race. So I should actually back up a bit and talk about where we are in the election process. We had a preliminary mayoral campaign. We had 2 Democrats in that race. We're now down to 1, and that would be Jen Grigoritis. She is now the officially endorsed candidate of this committee. I just want to be clear on that. In the last forum, we had a couple of school committee candidates. Those were Matt Hartman and Seamus Kelly, and they are the 2 Dems in the race. So guess what? They are our officially endorsed candidates in that race. We have a number of ward races that are going on right now. In Ward 1, Manjula Karamchedi, she is our endorsed candidate. She is running unopposed. In Ward 2, we have John Obremski. He is our Democrat candidate. He is opposed, and he is the person who we endorse there. In Ward 5, we have Kim Vandiver, who is running unopposed, and she is our candidate in that race, a Democrat. And in Ward 6, we have Barb Travers. She is in a competitive race, and she is the Democrat. We do endorse her. And then in Ward 7, we have Devin Ramanul, who is running unopposed, is a Democrat, and we endorse him. So we have a wonderful slate of candidates going into this November election. And a big question, though, has to do with the at-large race, which you are about to hear about. It is the most complicated race because there are 10 people altogether in this race, of whom 5 are Democrats who are on the stage behind me. Tonight is an opportunity for you to meet those 5 candidates. And for anybody, I would say, as you look towards this November election, this is the place where you really have to do your homework and really look at all of those names, because there are a lot of them. And we ask you to look upon the people at this stage in particular. So I will now hand it over to our moderator for this forum, and that is once again our school committee member, Liz DeSelm.
Thank you very much, Jim. So welcome everybody to the City Council candidate forum. Candidates, as explained prior, first question will be introductions, followed by 6 very interesting questions, and then final round will be closing remarks. We start tonight with introductions. Introductions with Maya Jamaluddin. Please take it away, ma'am.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Maya Jamaluddin. My pronouns are she and her. I am a mom of 4. I am a Melrose resident, obviously, that lived in Melrose for over 12 years, although I don't like to mention how long, and because it really doesn't matter how long I've been in Melrose. I'm passionate to advocate for marginalized population and those that are being underrepresented, specifically at the decision table. This is my 2nd term as a city council at large, and I am hoping that this new city council that is coming under new mayor and new leadership will be able to continue advocating along my side for underrepresented, for marginalized population that have been historically been targeted in Melrose. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Lila Migliarelli.
Didn't realize that Maya had finished.
I did
Apologies.
finish. I did finish. I tried to make it short and sweet. For now.
Sorry, I'm a new moderator. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Lila Migliarelli. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you first to the Melrose Dems for hosting tonight. I remember attending my first Democratic City Committee meeting back in 2016 at a time that felt very precarious and ended up being very precarious in our nation. I wanted to get involved after having moved back to Melrose in 2015. So shortly after that, I applied and was appointed to the Melrose Human Rights Commission, served there for a few years, and then ran for election for the Melrose City Council in 2019. As your city councilor for the past 4 years, I have led the council in taking action to hold the administration accountable for its fiscal practices, I have helped small businesses during the pandemic, advocated for smart growth and affordable housing, and also supported critical investments in our infrastructure across the city. I've also proudly advocated for residents who have been traditionally marginalized and vowed to continue to support making our community as diverse and welcoming for all. Looking ahead, our small but vibrant community has challenges to overcome, but we can overcome those challenges together with strategic planning, sound leadership, and creative problem solving. I want to thank those of you who have supported me these past 4 years, and I'm ready to bring my diligent, inclusive approach and willingness to do the hard work for a third term on the Melrose City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Migarelli. Mr. O'Connell, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Selm. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here, and much thanks to the Melrose Dems for making this event possible. I'm Ed O'Connell, and I'm running for an at-large seat on your city council. I've served on your school committee for the past 8 years, having first been elected in 2015 and having won re-election in 2019. My current term ends in December. I've been elected twice by my colleagues to serve as school committee chair, and I've otherwise served as chair of several of our subcommittees. I've been on the bargaining team for the last 2 teacher contracts, and I've led the successful negotiations of several of our other bargaining unit agreements. I chaired the school committee through COVID, discovering in the process the joys of WebEx and Zoom in the public realm, and led the difficult but ultimately successful negotiations over return to instruction, getting our teachers and our children back in their classrooms with all the necessary and appropriate health and safety protocols in place. I've worked with 3 mayors and now 3 superintendents. I've participated in the last 8 budget processes for the school department, the city's largest department. I have witnessed firsthand the vital importance of clear communication and constant collaboration between City Hall and the school administration. I've seen firsthand what works and, frankly, what doesn't. I want to bring all of that experience to the Melrose City Council. With 2 at-large incumbents not running for re-election, there are 2 open seats on the council. With your help and blessing, I intend to win one of those seats. I hope you'll give me a chance this November. I thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to our discussion tonight.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. And now, Chris Sullivan. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Sullivan, and I'm running for City Council. The reason why I'm running is that I'd like to be able to keep what I see as the special quality of Melrose that exists. I moved here 25 years ago with my wife, Judith, who's here in the audience with me, supporting me. And we were lucky enough to have 3 children, Molly, Rowan, and Christopher, who we had an opportunity to have as part of our family while we were here in Melrose. Because of that attachment to Melrose and that special quality, there's a delicate balance that I see that is a little bit in danger of being tipped. I'm very concerned about the overdevelopment of Melrose. The projects that have been slated and ones that have already been approved and ones that are being contemplated is one of my concerns. And the balance that I see in Melrose is a city of 29,000 people, but it's got that small town feel, doesn't it? And that feel and that quality is something that I think is worth fighting for. And I'd like to be able to be that advocate, be that champion on behalf of having what I call responsible development. I'm not anti-development. I'm pro-development, but pro-development that's responsible. Because with increased pollution, density, traffic, the stress on our municipal services, the fire, the police, as well as the school system, it's something that is affecting all of our lives. And I'd like that opportunity to be able to work to try to keep that quality of life that we have in the city of Melrose. I'm also an ardent supporter of the Community Preservation Act that we tried to pass about 10 or 15 years ago, and were unsuccessful with that group on the city council, then called the Board of Aldermen. I'd like to see that passed so that we can provide funds for affordable housing, open space, historic preservation, outdoor recreational activities. So I know we have limited time here tonight, but I am a newcomer. I don't have all of the pedigree and all of the individual appointments that a lot of the other candidates have, But what I do have is I do have that ability to want to try to make change and change for the better by looking after individuals, looking after homeowners, and looking after residents in Melrose. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And now, last but not least, Ryan Williams. Mr. Williams, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Selm. My name is Ryan Williams. I am the current Ward 7 City Councilor here in Melrose. I moved here with my family about 7 years ago, and since that day, almost day one, I've been a tireless advocate for neighborhood quality of life, for street safety. I've been thrilled to be a part of the teams that beautified our downtown with parklets and public art. I was thrilled to bring the first traffic calming program to the city of Melrose, which is now on Woodland and is rolling out on Lion Street. And I have personally shepherded and in some cases even designed in part over $500,000 in sidewalk installations and repairs throughout the city, not just in Ward 7, but in streets all across the city. And I've been doing this because I love the way that Melrose interconnectedness brings us all together as a community. You can't walk more than a few feet sometimes without bumping into somebody that you know. That's the character of Melrose, and we have to work to preserve that, and part of that work is recognizing how the city council can advocate for people and the everyday activities that they're doing out on our streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. All right, first question. We will start with Ms. Migliorelli. In the November election, Melrose voters will be asked to decide whether to accept a debt exclusion to fund a $130 million project to rehabilitate Central Fire Station and build 2 new fire stations on the east and west sides of the city and a new police station at the site of the Ripley School. The City Council will have to vote to approve that bond, which could come in at a higher rate than anticipated. If the question passes, would you support the bond, even if it comes in at a higher rate? And if the question fails, would you support a new ballot question to fund the safety buildings?
Thank you, Ms. DeSalm. The need to update our public safety buildings is indisputable. When I toured the police and fire stations back in 2019, I was appalled at the horrible conditions that they had. So I think that we really do need to act now to provide a safe environment and working conditions for our police and fire. I voted to put the question on the ballot because I believe that it should be up to voters to decide whether they want to spend their tax dollars to help support our first responders. And as chair of the Appropriations and Oversight Committee, I chaired the meeting in which we deliberated this issue, which was a very fruitful and in-depth conversation where we discussed this issue in particular, the question regarding what are the next steps? What are the next steps for this initiative? And the new mayor and the new city council will play a huge role. Back on August 31st, and then final vote in the first week of September, the city council approved the ability approved the option to put on the ballot to seek a debt exclusion, which does not include the authorization of the exact amount. The bond will have to go through bond council. That will take quite a long process, which will include a process by which architects and planning will revisit the original plans of the Public Safety Building Committee and come up with a final number. Just today, looking on the city's website, there is a frequently asked question regarding whether the bond could come in higher than 130, and there seems to be a little bit of confusion about that. During our meeting on August 31st, we were told that we can there's definitely a possibility that it would come in beyond that, and I think that at that time, I would, as a counselor sitting in that role, have to balance what that amount is, where we're at, and working with the new mayor to see what the project plan will be. But either way, I think we need to move forward, and I would support another project if put in front of us.
Thank you, Ms. Migliorelli. Mr. O'Connell, please.
Thank you, Ms. DeSalm. First of all, I don't expect the debt exclusion to pass in November, although I do believe it is a much needed and long overdue investment in our municipal infrastructure, and one I support because I don't believe the public is ready at this juncture to trust our local government with additional public funds. Again, despite the great and obvious need for same. I believe the taxpayers of Melrose will first want to see that the reconstituted City Council and School Committee, along with the new mayor, are worthy of the public trust that was so hard-earned with the 2019 tax override and then allowed to slip away in the face of a series of challenging circumstances. COVID, to name the biggest, along with some admittedly unforced errors, and a major accounting debacle with regard to the school budget. And as a member of the school committee, I accept my fair share of the responsibility for some of these challenges, fair or not. But I'm also realistic about where we are as a community as a result. I don't believe the public appetite is there at present for property tax increases of any kind, save perhaps for the CPA, with appropriate exclusions and exemptions for seniors and low-income residents. I support the public safety building plan in full, but I would not have voted to put the debt exclusion on the ballot in November. I would have preferred that we wait until the fall of '24 to allow time for the reconstituted government to settle in, to begin to prove itself, and importantly, to allow time for a public information campaign to fully educate and inform the public about the ins and outs of the plan and the ballot question, and to encourage its passage. Likewise, a property tax override for operational expenses. The public trust just isn't there at present. I'm confident that it will be in the years to come because we as elected officials will have earned it and made a clear and convincing case for the additional funding. I'm reminded in a way of the override effort. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, please.
I support the debt exclusion. When it was first at the Appropriations Subcommittee hearing, I was there for that hearing, and I know a number of us were here as well. And it was pretty extraordinary to see that the turnout of the Melrose Fire Department, the Melrose Police Department officers who were there. Some of them I know, some of them, the vast majority, I don't. But I support that because I can't think of any other service, really, that is at the core of municipal services in any city or town than your police or fire department. Can you think of any other one? I can't. I mean, they basically are charged with keeping us safe. They're basically charged with keeping us from having our houses lost, or the worst case scenario, if your house were to burn down, and the catastrophes that are attached to that. So when it comes to supporting them and trying to get them to do their job, we have to do everything we can. I'm sure a lot of us, the folks who are here today, are politically active. They're attuned. That's why they're here tonight on a weeknight. And the folks who watch this, I'm sure, are politically attuned as well. But if you watched, I believe it was NBC that did the special on the condition of the Melrose Fire Department, particularly down at the main branch next to City Hall, you will see how much the great need is for the police and the fire to have good equipment and good living conditions. And I think we should give a chance for the Melrose voters. I think if they're sufficiently informed about this project and about this debt exclusion, that they will pass it. I can't see the future, and I know Ed and I agree upon a lot of things, and he's probably right. I'm probably wrong. But at the same time, I think we should give him a chance. Thank you.
Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you. So I voted to put the debt exclusion question on the ballot. I did that after a lot of discussion, and I, like some of the other counselors, all of whom voted in support of this, I think came to the conclusion that it was right for us to ask the voters whether or not they believed that the buildings should be replaced. I do believe that the buildings should be replaced. I don't know if the city is ready to replace all of them at the same time. If the question were to fail, would I support another one? Absolutely. And I would hope that it would be structured in a way that allowed for a time-sensitive plan that put the highest priority items first and then staggered the different debt exclusions over time so that we could absorb the costs slowly. I agree that the police and the fire department are some of the most important core services we have. I can think of another one, and it's the school department. If we're willing to put $130 million into 4 buildings for public safety, we should be willing to put more than $5 million into the schools every few years. I think that we as a city need to own up to our financial responsibilities. And it can be challenging at times, but there's only two ways around it. You're either going to have to pass taxpayer increases, or you're going to have to support new construction in the city, because new construction brings in the most tax dollars compared to the taxes that we all pay in our property taxes. So in short, yes, I support the initiative. I'm excited to see voters go out and to see what their response is. And if it doesn't pass, I sincerely hope that we can very quickly come back to the meeting table to come up with a plan for how to get something over the transom as fast as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Jamaluddin, please.
Thank you. I do support the project for the public safety buildings. I do appreciate the work that was done from the committee. First, I want to thank Councillor McGarry for providing a clear explanation about how that works, because I know for some it may be confusing. I'm not going to repeat what she mentioned, but I also wanted to say that if it doesn't pass, which I'm not sure how much we are able to canvass, to do the work to make folks come along and get those voters in. But if we weren't able to pass it, I will be interested in seeing how can we bring to the table another proposal that first fix the budget and bring more funding to the budget, find ways to get grants and funding so that we would have more leeway in our budget, within our budget, to provide for that project. And hopefully we'll be able to explore other options in terms how to split this project into different phases. So whatever the new proposal, if we had to go to a new proposal, gonna come to before us, I will be supporting for the sake of keeping those that keep us safe, also safe in their own, at their work. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question tonight begins with Mr. O'Connell. Mr. O'Connell, the mayor's budget requires a $2.7 million free cash reallocation to the school department to be voted upon by the City Council upon free cash certification by the state. Should you be elected, would you vote in favor of that reallocation?
I would, but I'll also rephrase the question to get at something that's really important in this regard. And for me, this is the why does the school department always get the short end of the stick question. And why do we consistently have this structural deficit built into the budget? And I think it's happened for two principal reasons. One, because the school department is the largest city department, financially speaking and otherwise, and because it is an entity unto itself with a variety of revenue streams, financial inputs, and cash flows that provide just enough float to carry itself into the fall when free cash is theoretically to be available to fill the gaps. And our remarkably conservative approach to municipal budgeting ensures that there will almost always be free cash available each fall. The school budget, because of its size and relative fluidity, is thus most susceptible and accommodating to chronic underfunding as a municipal budgeting strategy. That understanding and perspective is value that I intend to bring to the City Council. As I somewhat memorably described it not that long ago during our school budget process, my 8th as an elected official, it is the classic case of gladly paying you on Tuesday for a hamburger today, with the city saying to the schools, pass your budget, order your hamburgers, and we'll see you in the fall with the money. That doesn't make anyone on the school committee very comfortable or confident, and it shouldn't, but it apparently works as a municipal budgeting strategy, CR AA+ bond rating. But it leaves the schools held hostage each year to the hoped-for good fortune of city finances come fall. That's no way to run a railroad, in my estimation, or a school department serving nearly 4,000 students and their families and caregivers with 500+ employees and it has to change. Having someone on the city council with the experience, thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, please.
Thank you. To answer your question, yes, I would support that because we have to support that. That's the only way that funding has been currently utilized and would be utilized in the future. But I would say this, is that this practice of filling the gap with free cash is a bad practice. It's a practice that has been created, from what I can see, historically out of necessity. But it should be stopped because free cash itself is really not for that purpose. Free cash is supposed to be kind of your emergency savings for your individual family or your household, where you would put away a certain amount of money for a rainy day. If you have a crisis, if you have a need for something that you can't anticipate. I know the practice. I know how it's been going on for such a long time and will certainly continue initially, but it's not the purpose of free cash, because free cash can at some point in time go away, or it can be lessened to the point where the school budget and the school system as a whole will be negatively affected. So I would work, and I would certainly work with people who have more experience than I do, and I'll be honest to admit that, with respect to the intricacies and the Byzantine practices of the school budget and the school committee, to change that, because we shouldn't hold our school hostage to that type of, in my view, an insecure method of funding the school system. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, please.
Absolutely. You know, we have a math problem with this budget, and because I'm a public school kid, I'm actually really good at math. And I think the only way for us to escape this cycle, this orbit that we're in of, you know, terror and crisis, is to create new sources of revenue. We all know that the city council is not going to be the ones to lay hands on the school budget and fix the problem. It's just not going to happen. It's not our role. We vote up or down, yes or no, when it comes to us. And that's a tough choice to make. Do you vote yes for something that you don't think is good enough, or do you vote no for something that is going to get you through the day, you know, and wreck everything for everybody? That's the stress, the challenge of being on the city council. So what I would say is that as a city councilor, I'm ready to work with the new administration to figure out what the actual plan is for future revenue growth in this city. And I'm talking about an override. I'm talking about what years does it need to happen? We know where inflation's at. We know when the budget grows. We know exactly where we're at with these figures. We just need to point to the chart and say, this is the point where we no longer have the ability to pay for this and we need to make more money. And then we need to figure out, okay, working backwards from there, you know, 2-3 years, let's figure out a way to put this on the table in front of everybody, get some focus groups together, really start talking about it. You know, not to dip too far back into the other question, but we didn't do that with the public safety buildings. Everybody knew it was a problem, but the Public Safety Building Committee came together very quickly, and in the span of a year, they delivered a plan to us, and we didn't have that kind of, you know, outreach that I think that we should have had. We didn't have the kind of planning from the municipal side that I think we should have had. We kind of left it in the lap of residents and independent consultants, and they did a fantastic job. But that doesn't make up for a lack of leadership. So we just need to get our hands around what we really need to do in this city in order to keep paying our bills. And we need to plan that out for the future, and we need to say, okay, 2027, 2026, whatever the year is, that's going to be the year that we're going to need to do this.
Thank you. Mr. Maladine, please.
Thank you. I am really looking forward to work among the new mayor and with the new body of the school committee members. Last week I met with our superintendent interim, and one of the things that I was asking him is, what is your priorities during this short term serving as the interim? And it was very clear to me that he is looking to fix this budget, that it's no secret, it's a big problem in our community, but also find out why and try to reallocate and put an itemized budget when it's going to be provided to us. And it's really fascinating how important is to have a experienced superintendent, so hopefully the next superintendent will have those skills and expertise and priorities set. But also, I will be hoping that our next mayor will bring before us orders from the free cash that would support the school budget and that would increase it. But moreover, I will be also challenging and encouraging our mayor, as I always encourage him, encourage our current mayor in every school, in every city council meeting, to to use the free cash, but also to use those money and include special education, para, and subs, so that we do have great support for those that are marginalized students in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Migliorelli, please.
Thank you, Mr. Salm. As my council colleagues and colleague on the school committee stated, we're in a very precarious financial situation. Melrose is reliant on our property tax base to fund our schools, and the constraints of Prop 2.5 mean that we are at times, like we're in right now, of high inflation. The city is unable to keep pace with costs of doing business. And as inflation continues to rise, two drivers of high costs for schools, transportation, special education costs, have risen as well and are projected to continue to rise. So I think that our school budget that we have reflects well-deserved increases for our teacher contract. And to ensure that we pay a fair wage for our educators, we need to make sure that this works. And I will support the free cash, but the free cash request in FY24, because we have no other choice. That is, I think, the scariest part of that is that free cash request is just to offer level services for our students. That's unacceptable. We are at a time in which, post-pandemic, we're in an educational crisis, a mental health crisis for our students, and we need to be providing more than just what level services are. So I would support this. I think another important factor to mention is that it isn't really more than just any one of us, although I'm happy for this question. I think this question needs to be asked to the other city council candidates. There's 5 of us here tonight. There's 5 others that need to go on record with whether or not they're going to support this free cash request, along with our board councilors too. We need 8 votes to support this for level funding. So I think when you're looking at candidates and who you should support, if the schools are of primary importance to you, you need to be asking those questions of the other candidates as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 3 goes to Mr. Sullivan to start with. What is your view of the relationship between the City Council and the Mayor's office? How would you manage this relationship and leverage it to serve your constituents?
Well, I would take a look at the view, I guess, that I have, and I think a lot of residents have that have not been in politics, in the sense of actually holding a specific office, whether you're the mayor, whether you're a city council member. I think we need to open up City Hall a little bit, and the best way to do that is to have greater communication between the mayor and the city council. And when I mean opening up City Hall, I mean inviting people to come down and to really be able to communicate with both the mayor and with the city council. I think coming to city council meetings, unless you're very comfortable publicly presenting yourself and speaking, is very intimidating. Most people who have an issue are concerned about an issue, having them show up at public participation, which is good. Every time there's a full board meeting, and I think in most of the subcommittee meetings, you do have that opportunity. But what I would like to do is I would like to have at least once a month to have a meeting with the full board and the mayor being present, so that residents could come and bring up any issue that they want. It doesn't have to be a specific order. It doesn't have to be a specific bill. It would be something that would be open up, and I think that open up to residents to bring any issue. So I think that would help facilitate communication from the residents to the mayor and to the city council. Because I think what we really should be asking is not so much the communication between the mayor and the city council, which I think is pretty good to some extent, but I also think it's more important to open up communication from Melrose residents. And I think by having that day at least once a month where there's an open meeting for any resident to come and express any issue that they have would help facilitate a better response by city government, both from the mayor's office as well as from the city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you. So, you know, all of this moves at the speed of trust, right? And I have been very, very pleased to work with the current mayor, and I will be very, very pleased to work with the next mayor, frankly, whether I'm elected or not, to bring about the kind of change that I've been working towards in Melrose for the last 7 years. And I think it's really important for people to understand this when they're looking at the city council. If you bring people into this council whose goal is disruption, whose goal is to halt or to arrest different areas of the city's growth, there will be friction in those chambers, and that friction will result in a lack of business being completed. Your city councilor can only stand up for you and can only get the things that you need done if they have good relationships with the mayor and with their other councilors. Councilor Migliorelli said it very well. We need 8 votes to do anything. There's only 11 of us on the body, so you can only lose a handful of people in anything, and you lose the vote. So I personally, I have had great relationships and great time working with the current mayor. He knows that I'll hold him accountable and I'll do it publicly, and you know, that's fine. We don't always have to get along and agree on everything, and I'm very comfortable standing up for what I believe in, even if it means speaking out in public, even if it means ruffling the feathers of people who I consider very good friends, if it means I can meet the goals I feel I need to meet for my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mulladine, please.
Thank you. So I hope that our Dem mayor candidate will be elected. But with that said, whether or not, and whoever is going to take that seat, I will make sure to work with them for the sake of our residents and my constituents. I will keep, as I am doing right now, I will keep the conversation and communication between City Council, my supporters and constituents, and City Hall. I will bring feedback for their office. Whenever there is any gap, I will make sure to give those feedback and work with them to close those gaps and improve. If there is any area that needs improvement. However, as my colleagues, my supporters, and the current mayor know me very well for that, I will be the first one that holds myself and them accountable for whenever we do any kind of lack or mistake that need to be fixed. I will be the person that will be calling myself and them out for that. I will be encouraging our mayor to prioritize working on this budget, working with all the different departments in our city, from boards, commission, committees, that we know that there is a lot of work needs to be done to renew and to bring new voices to that table. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Migliorelli, please.
Thank you. I think one of the first things I learned being on the council is how strong a form of mayoral government we have in Melrose. It's uniquely strong. I often hear people, comparing Melrose to other cities and, well, the city council could do XYZ thing like the Boston City Council. It's just not possible. So I think, when I talk to residents, it's something I have to bring up constantly to kind of explain and let them know that, we don't vote on housing developments. We can't increase the budget. We can't start new programs. The mayor has to do that. So I think, once again, another point to listen to, people who have not served on the council or are not familiar with Melrose city government, if a candidate's offering to create a new program and service, that's a great idea. They have to get the mayor on board. And then they're going to also have to get, once again, as I've said, 8 other city councilors to support it. So I think, first of all, the mayoral form of government's very strong, which means you do need a great relationship. I think over the last 4 years, I've watched councilors work with our current mayor on trying to pass, either it's working together on ordinance or or to get funding for a new position. Social worker, Councillor Jamaluddin did that very well. But it doesn't happen all the time. I think looking ahead with this new mayor, what I would like to see are just a couple things. One being, a really careful look at our sources of revenue, as we've discussed. That's a primary issue. I think coming up with a task force to examine our fees, our fee structure, which I know has begun a little bit at City Hall, but to really dig into that a little bit deeper, really rely and push our economic development area further, and because I think if we're going to have to turn to the residents to increase their taxes, we should make sure in city government we're doing all we can to explore revenue sources and places for cutting. I also think the number one thing that I hear from residents is infrastructure, roads, sidewalks. Thank you. And I think that working with the new mayor to make sure that's prioritized with funding issues like free cash would be best. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connell, please.
So, the relationship between the council and the mayor should be focused on communication and accountability. And one area where this is particularly important is with regard to economic development. In tandem with the mayor, I think the city council has a critical role to play in supporting and encouraging economic development in Melrose. First of all, local businesses, owners, and their employees are an important constituency of elected officials, both councilors and the mayor. Like the mayor, councilors should also be accessible to and advocates for our partners in the business community. Their interests are vital to the financial stability of our city and the quality of life of our residents. Our policies, our ordinances, our regulatory scheme, and our financial investments should reflect that. Importantly, we should continue to invest in our schools. The mayor, of course, will be serving on the school committee. Good schools have been shown over and over across Massachusetts and nationwide to be a significant driver of local economies. That helps to sustain our local businesses, increase our property values, and improve our shared quality of life. Likewise, the council, working with the mayor, will have to continue to invest in our municipal infrastructure, our streets, our sidewalks, our parklets, our lighting and signage, our street cleaning and trash removal and otherwise. These types of basic city investments and services make all the difference in creating a safe and welcoming environment for businesses, their customers, and our residents. Working with the mayor, I will support regular review and updating of our local regulatory framework, licensing, permitting, zoning, and the like. These are hugely important factors in terms of a business's decision to locate here and to stay here. And the relationship between the council and the mayor is a big part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Question number 4 begins with Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, in Melrose municipal government, only the mayor with police and fire unions and the school committee with teacher and administrative unions engage in collective bargaining. What role would you play as a counselor in aiding your municipal colleagues in these negotiations?
Probably very little would be my guess. The City Council is not the group that actively intervenes in negotiations with unions. What the City Council does is advocate, and that's what I have done, and that's what I'll continue to do, right? I'll advocate for our unions, especially our teachers' union, because our teachers are our most underpaid group of public servants in the city. And I will be out there in support of the folks that teach our kids for them to get the highest pay possible so that they can do the best job that they can do. As a Hoover parent, as a Melrose public school parent myself, that's just part of being a dad, you know, and it's not even necessarily part of being a city councilor, but I have the privilege of having a bit of an elevated platform for that, that I can choose to use for that purpose. So what role? I think the role is to vote yes. The role is to make sure that we have enough money in the accounts. A couple of weeks ago, I asked the economic development director to start showing us stabilization fund balances on the end of every order that comes down for a withdrawal from those funds. And she went to the CFO and they did that. And so now we've got stabilization fund balances so that we can make an informed decision, and so can the public when they look at these orders. Are we drawing too much from these accounts? Do the accounts have enough in them? Are we balancing the budget well enough so that we can prepare for collective bargaining and the rate increases, the salary increases that are going to come with that? So the City Council, our role to vote up or down on the increases. We can also use our platform to advocate for strong unions and for strong salaries, particularly for our teachers. And we can also make sure that the city is exhibiting good financial and fiscal practice by ensuring that we have the money to cover our bills.
Thank you. Ms. Jamaluddin, please.
Yeah. Can I ask you to repeat the question? I just want to make sure I heard it correctly.
Yes, of course. In Melrose Municipal Government, only the mayor with police and fire unions and the school committee with teacher and administrative unions engage in collective bargaining. What role would you play as a councillor in aiding your municipal colleagues in these negotiations?
This year the school actually had to go through this, and it came before the city council. I was in favor of making sure for pay equity and to fairly pay our teachers. I will definitely be supporting this. However, as any of my city council colleagues, it is not up to us to make that decision, but I worked the past 4 years on building those bridges between myself as a city councilor and my school committee colleagues, elected officials, and also by meeting with administrators to provide feedback, to work on solutions so that our employees and union employees would be paid equally and fairly. As a diversity and equity inclusion officer, I totally understand how important is the work and how important is for our educators and our staff to be paid well and to be treated equally and equitably to be able to provide the best care and support for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Migliorelli, please.
Thank you, Ms. DeSalm. As we've just referenced, just gone through the teacher's contract, and on the city council, I think what we did to sort of support those conversations in the only way we can, because we are the primary fiscal stewards of the city, is to show where money might be available. So when the mayor is struggling to fulfill contract obligations or negotiations, and the school committee is doing that, what we did, and it, I think sort of coincided at the same time, was me and along with my fellow counselors, 2 of whom are at this table, filed orders to go through the city's finances, whether it was the budget shortfall at the schools, free cash, and ARPA funding, to kind of take a look at what are our available resources as a way to point out to the mayor if there are gaps in these contract negotiations. If we say that we are committed to supporting teacher wages and administrator wages as we are with police and fire, and we are cash strapped, can we get creative about where we could help find and close those gaps? But that's it. That's basically our role. We're not at the negotiating table. The negotiations are private by law. We don't know what's happening. We don't have that information. I think all that we can do, as Councillor Williams said, is to ensure that our city's financials are sound so that we can fulfill those contract obligations, vote for them. I think also, I just wanted to note too, the city's main objective is to provide services. And over half of our budget expenditures, are people related, personnel and benefits. And so when we are then on the flip of that looking, where can we cut in our budgets? That would be people, that would be services, that may be in violation of contracts that we have already executed with our police, fire, labor unions, and teacher unions. So I think that's something to keep in mind moving forward, that we are in the business of serving the public, and paying those wages are of extreme importance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Selm. I agree with Councilor Migliorelli. I think the council's primary role in this regard is to ensure that we have the financial resources to fund our contracts. I also think as city councilors we have an obligation to provide a forum when appropriate for the airing of grievances. I think we can also use our public position to develop information, to share that information with the public when and where appropriate. and otherwise to support the mayor and our professional staff in reaching fair and financially responsible agreements. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, please.
Thank you. The role of the City Council in a negotiation, for instance, between a police union and the City of Melrose is really one of a bystander. We have no official role. We cannot get involved in any specific part of the negotiations, but that doesn't mean that we simply would become a potted plant in these discussions. I think what we can do, and what I would be more than willing to do, by my training and my profession, I'm an attorney, I'm a litigator, I'm also a mediator. I've spent most of my professional life either litigating cases or settling them. And I've had cases where I would never think that the parties would ever come to a conclusion, regardless of what their positions are throughout the beginning of a case. Towards the end, bringing them together and getting them to agree upon a compromise is something that is difficult to do. It's difficult to do in litigation. It's probably even harder to do in this setting, but that's something that I think I would be willing to try to contribute in an informal way to try to bring the parties together. Both our police, fire, and our teachers' unions deserve respect. They deserve support, but at the same time, we also have to represent the taxpayers who live here in Melrose. So it's a type of a situation where I could see mediation being a way to support the mayor in his role and also to support the unions to try to find common ground. I do it professionally, and I'd be glad to be able to help as I can informally in that role as a city council member. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 5 begins with Mr. Molladine. Mr. Molladine, the City Council does not have a direct role in the planning or permitting of business or residential development, but it does have a crucial role in creating the municipal regulatory context in which all development occurs. Please tell us how you would like to see the City Council shape Melrose's development over the next 2 years. What does the future of Melrose look like to you, and how would you bring that vision closer to us?
Yeah. Thank you for asking this question. One of my priorities to make sure that Melrose is more open for all, and by all means not only different backgrounds and but also different socioeconomic level. So I will be looking to find and supporting any effort that can bring more affordable housing into our community. But the work does not stop that. If we were able to do that, and if we were able to bring different families with different socioeconomic level, our work should continue by making sure that we can provide the support for those families that chose to make Melrose their home, regardless of what socioeconomic level they have. By making sure that we can provide those support resources and make sure that it is actually sustainable for them to stay in Melrose. In addition, I want to make sure to provide, to work with different departments to put more resources that support that are, those that don't feel that Melrose is really welcoming for them. So for instance, if I'm gonna make Melrose affordable for some, but also they still don't feel welcomed and they don't feel that they are part of this community, I want to make sure to provide those resources to educate myself and my neighbors and my community why it is important to welcome them in a way that providing resources that keep them in our community.
Thank you. Ms. Migliorelli, please.
Thank you. So I think this question's about it's housing and development, and housing is it's a crisis in the greater Boston area. It's felt even more acutely for Melrose, as we are within the I-95 belt. But I think that I've always said that, one of the benefits of being in Melrose is that it does have such a diverse socioeconomic population. And so in order to retain that, we need to be thinking creatively about how to make sure that Melrose is affordable for seniors who want to age in place, and how is it for young families to move in and go through our school system. And I think that leads to us having to be open to smart growth and development. On the council, I helped to co-file the city's first affordable housing trust, which is a key factor, key way to help make housing more affordable for residents. I've also supported that Melrose's housing production plan, which narrowly passed the council and is poised to help set Melrose up for success in terms of planning and zoning. I know that there's lots of concerns in the city about development and growth. I think we can all agree no one wants a city that's overly congested, but creating housing near mass transit is what makes sense, and it's what experts recommend as a way to have smart growth in housing. No one wants overcrowded schools, but I think we do want to make housing affordable for our teachers and paras to be able to live and work in Melrose. Owning a home is a way to build and create wealth for families who have been left out of that process for decades, and creating multiple housing options at every level for people who are living alone, for families, creating them at different levels, different housing price points. I think that just makes it a win-win for everyone. So I would be supporting what the Melrose Housing Production Plan proposes, and thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Selm. I too agree that the housing production plan gives us a pretty clear roadmap of action steps in terms of where we should be heading on these issues. First and foremost, we should establish and empower the recommended implementation committee. Other communities have done this with success. And as has been discussed elsewhere, we should be supporting and funding our own down payment assistance fund. With specific regard to the regulatory framework, I think we should be further incentivizing affordable housing production through zoning density and dimensional relief for affordable housing units. I think we should also be promoting and encouraging deed-restricted affordable housing. We should certainly adopt the Community Preservation Act, and we should be encouraging and supporting our planning department and our planning board to revise our zoning ordinance to allow and encourage a more diverse range of housing types across our city. We want a mix of housing types. We want affordable housing. We want racial equity. We want to build on what we have through historic preservation in terms of enhancing our neighborhoods and our existing built environment. And we want to continue to sound the drumbeat on all of these aims and the action steps necessary to achieving them. That means real ongoing community engagement and not just leaving another plan on the shelf. It's not simply enough to state our goals. We have to act with intention to achieve them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, please.
Thank you. Melrose, I see, is at a crossroads with respect to development. I mentioned that in my opening comments, where I have in the past worked with neighbors and with community groups that frankly didn't get very good representation at that time from the city council, didn't get good representation from City Hall, and didn't get good representation from city government. They were faced with opposing large developers who have a considerable amount of financial wherewithal, and I think that Melrose too often gets the short stick on development. What do I mean by that? I mean that developers that come into town and will put in projects here that they would never dream of putting in Lexington or Concord or Wellesley or other towns. And that's fine, they make their money and then they leave town. And what happens? We're left with a development project that many times strains our municipal services, displaces our neighbors, and puts Melrose in the position of having to clean up the mess that they've created when they leave, our financial mess and the detriment to our quality of life. Now, I understand that the other folks who are even here on the on the table with me here tonight, and some of the other members who are not here who are running for city council have different views. They'd be much more pro-development or development at any cost. That's not me. I am for responsible development, and I think to answer the question about what happens in a couple of years from now, I hope that we can strengthen our zoning, because I think our zoning has been to some extent lessened and weakened to allow for less input from individuals who live here in Melrose and for the benefit of developers. And the way I look at it is this, and I'll try to keep it short, but I've had discussions with friends, and they say, Sully, look, it's a 50-unit project. What's the problem? It's 50 units. It's not that big of a deal. Time now? All right. Well, we can continue this discussion at the next debate, but I strongly support responsible development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Williams, please.
Could you repeat the question for me, please?
Of course. City Council does not have a direct role in the planning or permitting of business or residential development, but it does have a crucial role in creating the municipal regulatory context in which all development occurs. Please tell us how you would like to see the City Council shape Melrose's development over the next 2 years. What does the future of Melrose look like to you, and how can you bring that closer to us?
So much like the collective bargaining question, I think this is one where the advocacy of the city council really comes into play. The mayor and the city department heads, the Department of Planning, they're all listening to the city council meetings, and they're trying to figure out whether or not people will support different zoning moves. If they don't hear that support, they don't bring it forward. That's all there is to it. So if you're thinking about the direction of housing in Melrose, if housing is an important issue to you, this is a very important election, because you're only going to have a couple of chances to get it wrong on the ballot before you guarantee that the mayor and the planning department do absolutely nothing with zoning in the city. You know, when I moved to Melrose, to answer your question about what does Melrose look like, when I moved to Melrose 7 years ago, I moved my wife and my 2 kids into a 1,000 square foot, 2-family condo unit. To some people, that makes me the outsider. That makes me the one that's coming in to fill up your schools and wreck your town with traffic and put stress on your sewer system and your water system. I'm here to tell you that I'm in a 1-car family, that we have 5 people living in the 2-family home we live in. We have 2 cars total, and that down the street from me, a single-family home has 7 people living in it and 4 cars total. It's not about the type of housing that you build, it's about the kind of people that you bring in. And when we talk about housing in the city, what we're talking about is people. So, you know, it's one thing to say that you don't want development, or that you think development needs to be different, but what you really need to say is be honest with yourself and with everybody else at the table and say, I don't want people in this city. I don't want all these people. They're wrecking everything. They're filling up our schools. If you look, and by the way, if you look at the data on school placements, they're not coming from apartments and condos. People are not moving to Melrose and living in apartments to pump kids into the Melrose school system. They're moving to single-family homes. They're displacing homes where there's a single person living there alone, or maybe an older couple, and they're bringing their kids in with them. That's what causes the bubble that came into the school system, and it's a bubble that we don't see continuously. So in conclusion, I would support a lot of what was said tonight at the table in terms of CPA, in terms of, say time? You said time, okay, bye. I like 2 families, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'm sorry, I lost track. Lila, Ms. Miglarelli, question number 6, the final question of the night before we wrap up. Should you be elected to the City Council, what will your priorities be? What would you like to see the City Council do that it might not otherwise if you were not elected?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Okay, so what would I like to see do, and then what would happen if I wasn't elected, and what would?
What would you like to see? What would your priorities be should you be elected?
Yeah.
And in the instance that you aren't reelected, in your case, what would you like to see the City Council do in your stead? Okay.
So the first 2 I think I mentioned, because in working with the mayor, and as I've said, the City Council, you know, we have a very strong power of yes or no. So what I would like to do is support the new mayor, and what I had described, I think pushing for more rigorous exploration of revenue opportunities. I would be supportive if if going through that process, I would be supportive of putting an override on the ballot, because I don't think we have very many other options, and we're at a critical point with our schools in particular, but also for other city departments where we need to be engaging in a process in which we are looking at our revenues, and we've noticed it's not keeping pace with our needs. So it's an override shouldn't be a dirty word. It's something that needs to happen regularly, and I would be supportive of that. I think I would also want to see a city council to be supportive of zoning changes, which is the question that just came up, so I'm not going to reiterate all the particulars of that, but I do think we need to be implementing some of the suggestions that were put forth through the housing production plan and voting on that. If I am not on the council, I would say that as one of the few women on the council, that's a loss of representation. As the only member, only one of two women of color on the council, that is an even deeper loss. The city government has been primarily, including our boards and commissions, is primarily white and male, which brings a certain perspective, but we need all perspectives at the table. And with a city that's becoming increasingly diverse, it's really important to have those voices at the table when we're voting yes or no on really big ticket items that are going to come before us. So I would just ask that time. All right.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sell. I think the physical condition of our municipal infrastructure has to be the highest priority. Again, for me, it gets back to basics. From a taxpayer's perspective, if you can't keep my street and sidewalks in good condition, how can I trust that you can do the bigger and more complicated things? Our streets and sidewalks must be in excellent condition, not just good repair. It is a matter of safety, it is a primary obligation of local government, and it will be a priority of mine as a city councilor. I also think we should continue and further our efforts to date in support of pedestrian and bicycle safety generally. We should be promoting and facilitating those modes of travel whenever and wherever possible. I also think, getting a little more specific, that we should consider investing in a pair of electric shuttle buses to run on a circuit between our local business districts, downtown, Lower Main, Wyoming, Franklin, and Upper Maine, on weekends and on a similar circuit on weekday mornings to help get our residents to Oak Grove and out of single-occupant motor vehicles. Think home for the holidays, trolleys, but on a regularly scheduled basis. These electric vehicles could be leased to support a pilot program in this regard, taking advantage of government fleet leasing programs. These vehicles could also be used to support school sports and extracurricular activities, along with supplementing our METCO transportation services when not otherwise in use, resulting in substantial cost savings on these fronts. I would also further, with some specifics in terms of our streets and ways as a priority, I would support closing Main Street between Essex and Grove every Sunday in July and August to create a pedestrian mall in support of our local businesses, to encourage non-vehicular modes of travel, and to improve our shared quality of life as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, please.
Thank you. So it's an interesting question. I don't know who developed it, but it's a good question. What would you ask, or what would you like to see the city council do when you're not on the city council if you've lost? Well, I would like to see the city council pass the Community Preservation Act. I think that deals with the balance that I talked about in terms of keeping Melrose a livable place. It provides revenue for affordable housing, for open space, for outdoor recreational activities and historic preservation. What that does is it takes a little bit of the burden off of our need in order to find new revenue. But I think with controlled development, as I call it, responsible development, I hope that the city council would keep that in mind and to also strengthen some of the zoning requirements. I mean, part of the reason why zoning is created is it's to create a livable space. It's not a question of people coming into town or not coming into town. That's simply not the issue. It's whether or not you want to have density such that you have buildings that are so close together that have no height restrictions, that have no setback restrictions, that if you want to create such a hyper-urbanized environment, is that what you want in the sense of walking out of one large, 5, 10-story building and walking into the next one. No, that's not for me. I like the idea of having a backyard. I raised my children. I played t-ball. I coached t-ball. I loved playing catch in the backyard with them. I like the fact that you have that livability in the city of Melrose. And I think that's something I hope that the city council, if I don't win and the rest of the folks here do win, and continue to try to keep that idea of Melrose alive and well, so that you do have that livability. You're not dodging traffic every day just to go down to Brugger's and get your coffee in the morning, so that you can have a little bit of livability, have more open space, have parks where you can enjoy your family and time. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, please.
So when I first asked to be elected to city council, I had a couple of big planks. One of them was street safety, one of them was better parks and playgrounds, and I've delivered on both of those promises. I brought the first traffic calming program to the city of Melrose in partnership with the mayor's office. I was also on the team that created the downtown parklets, and I actually worked with the arts community myself to bring public art into those spaces. And I've brought all kinds of pilot programs in different streets all over the city. I've been doing that. I'm going to keep doing that. As the vice chair of the Melrose Pedestrian and Bicyclist Committee, I will be doing that until I leave Melrose, or until I die. In terms of parks, I brought about $150,000 into Foss Park, which is a beloved park. My kids call it the Rock Park. I see the needs at the Common all the time, and I sincerely hope that we can create a capital plan for our parks and playgrounds that demonstrates our commitment to funding the maintenance that's needed for these spaces on an ongoing basis, because some of them are in pretty rough shape. If I'm not on the council, my hope would be that the people who sit in that room, which is largely empty, okay? People don't come to city council meetings. It's a shame, because that's where your council is. You don't need a special meeting once a month. You can go see them twice a month, 3 times a month, 4 times a month. You can ask them anything you want, and if they don't want to answer, wait for them to leave the meeting and then ambush them, right? That's what I do. That's what I did before I got in. I hope that the city council realizes that the future of Melrose is in front of us and not behind us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mulladine, please.
Thank you. I mean, I wanted to start by saying that now we have 4 seats open, and not only 2. So Lila and myself, seats are not secured. So just, that's a question actually to ask for those that are running for at-large. Why are we running at-large and not against 2 women Democrats with marginalized identities, and not running for wards when we know that there is no Democrats representation for wards? So, and that, I'm gonna answer the question actually by saying that what Lila and myself bring to that table, I don't know if I can find it if we're not there. So the issues that we bring before us are about equity, about representation, about ensuring that everyone in Melrose and outside of Melrose, because we know that Melrose is not only for those that live in Melrose. We have folks that come from neighborhood communities and those that come for our school also from other communities. Make sure that those buildings and City Hall is accessible for them, and make sure that those resources that are there, the people that are coming, seeking those resources, are able to understand it. I will be looking, if I was not elected, I will be looking for those that will be elected to make sure that Melrose is sustainable, accessible, and equitable for all. And even if I wasn't elected, I advocated for those underrepresented. Let me just finish this. Before I served on city council, and I will not stop even if I wasn't on a city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Migliorelli, please. Sorry, that was the final question. So, fellow candidates, please, you have the final question of the night is your wrap-up. Mr. O'Connell, starting with you, any last questions, comments, or final statement that you would like to impart upon us? You have just a couple minutes.
Thank you, I think the important question before us all as candidates and as voters is, what does it take to be an effective elected official? And I think first and foremost, it's the willingness and the ability to talk less and listen more. I think some of us are better at that than others. I also think it's the ability to take a punch or two or three and to keep moving. The willingness and the ability to put the public interest above one's own personal and political interests. The ability to communicate, to negotiate, to persuade, to advocate, and to compromise when necessary and appropriate in the public interest. And as with all relationships and professional endeavors, the ability to work well with others, to lead when called upon, to follow when appropriate or necessary, and to support one's colleagues and their efforts in the public's best interest. That has been my approach during my 8 years on the school committee, and I will bring that same approach to my work on the city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Sure, my final comments, I do wish everybody, including everybody here, even though we have some difference of opinions, success in the election. And I think it's great that we have, I guess, 10 individuals running for 4 seats right now. And I don't know historically, I'm sure somebody could dig this up, when that's happened, but I don't recall it happening very recently. And I find that very healthy for Melrose. The more people that are interested in politics, the more people that are interested in serving in any capacity is a good thing. It shows that the community of Melrose is healthy, and I wish everybody sincerely luck. But I do hope that I win as well. I'm not counting myself out on this entirely. But I think that it's important for us going forward in touching again on the issue that's near and dear to me, opening up city government. I think you can run and ambush the city council members if you'd like, but a lot of people are not comfortable necessarily doing that. And I think we want to encourage more participation by residents so that if they did have one day to come down, I think that's an important thing so that they could feel a little less restrained to communicate in a fashion like that. Also, getting back to development, and I don't want to give this up, the point I was making before about somebody saying, well, Sully, it's only 50 units, it's no big deal. The problem is the next project is, well, it's 100 units, and then it's 150, and then it's 200, and the cumulative effect is very negative in tipping that balance that I see that's so important for us in Melrose. So we're not all going to agree on issues, and that's what makes our democracy great, and it's what makes Melrose great too, I think. And I would ask for your vote so that you do have somebody who would look after homeowners, who would look after individuals who are concerned about increased transportation issues, pollution in terms of traffic and city services. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, please.
This is a consequential election. When I came here in 2016, we had quite a few upsets, right? Jen Lemmerman is one of my favorite Melrose stories. I actually got to run into her. It was a great time a couple days ago. We have another opportunity here to either make a big statement and show the city of Melrose that we are going to get out there and get the right people elected into these seats, or to kind of sit on our butts and just let it all pass us by. There are 10 people running for 4 at-large seats, and make no mistake, this race will be decided, the future of the city's direction will be decided with the at-large candidates, because there's 4 of us. So I would ask all of the folks in this room, everyone listening at home, figure out what you can do to help support the campaigns that motivate you and that excite you. Reach out, look for their websites, get a sign, make a donation, offer to canvass, and do it for as many people as you can, because we need absolutely every good person on this council body as we can get. We have a great opportunity, we've got a great new mayor coming up, and we need a great council to support her. Thank you.
Ms. Maya Jamaluddin, please.
Thank you. I want to thank residents of Melrose and my constituents for the trust that they put in me for the past 4 years. I am committed and will continue to do so if I was elected, to supporting and advocating for everyone at the table, and for those that don't have voices, I will be your voice at the decision making. I also encourage everyone that is a about to make the decision of who to give their voices, to engage and ask those questions. If you can, if you have the time, to go back and check how our votes been and our role and our questions been during our time when we served at the council. That will also help you to make your decision. But most importantly, I will ask everyone on November 7th to make sure to vote. And if you cannot, there is different ways, whether by mail, whether absentee ballots, or I recently also learned, and my son was able to vote from overseas online, so that's also an option. I want to thank you everyone for being able to listen to us, and I hope I can get your votes.
Ms. Migliorelli, please.
Thank you. So I lived in Melrose the first 8 years of my life and moved back here in 2015. So for the last 8 years of my life, I've lived here as well. I don't know if that makes me a lifelong resident or not. I grew up here. It doesn't really matter. Whether you've lived here your whole life, whether you've moved in last week, whether you own your home or whether you rent your home, I'm here to represent you. The job of the city councilor may not be the most powerful in the city, but it is incredibly influential, as I've said, in terms of our ability to say yes or no. And in order to participate in the city council government, you have to be there, listen, evaluate, and make good decisions. So make sure who you're voting for not only supports your values, but is willing to do the hard work and show up for you as I've done for the last 4 years. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, your candidates for City Council.
I promised our city council candidates that we would be out of here at 9 o'clock at the latest, and I completely lied, so I apologize for that. But before we go, some people I just want to thank. Corey Allen, who's been at our camera all night. Bert Whittier, who has been running the sound. Kelly Tome, who's been our timer. And Liz DeSelm, who's been our moderator. And one more time, you can thank our candidates. Thank you, and remember to vote on November 7th. Bye-bye.